Seattle in late November was a city wrapped in a gray cloak of relentless drizzle and fog, where the sky seemed to pour out its sorrows without end. The streets glistened under slick pavements, and the cold, damp air seeped through every crack and corner, curling around the tall glass towers and brick buildings like an invisible weight. Inside my small third-floor apartment, nestled in a narrow alley away from the buzzing downtown, the yellow glow of a single lamp struggled to keep the shadows at bay. I'm Sierra Collins. I'm 24 years old, a computer engineering student trying to carve out a future in a world that felt as cold and unforgiving as the weather outside. My apartment was cluttered but mine, a refuge from the chaos of life, with my laptop perched on the desk like a beacon of hope and hard work. That laptop wasn't just a device. It was years of dreams, late nights, endless coding, and the fragile foundation of a better tomorrow. On that bleak night, the silence was shattered by the sharp buzz of my phone. I froze before it, fingers trembling as I unlocked the screen. The message from my father hit me like a gut punch. "Sold your laptop. Harper needs a new phone. Be grateful we feed you." Then the hammer fell harder. "Also, you'll cover her tuition. $6,000 by Friday, no exceptions." The words blurred before my eyes. I sank onto the worn-out chair, the room tilting as a tsunami of disbelief and rage crashed over me. How could they? My own family, the people who were supposed to be my anchor, had turned my life upside down with cold calculation. That laptop was mine, bought with sweat and sacrifice, a lifeline to my future. And now it was gone. Sold like some trivial possession, to feed the reckless whims of a sister who had never lifted a finger to earn anything. Tears welled up, but they weren't just sorrow. They were fury, raw, burning, a fire starting deep inside my chest. A lifetime of being overlooked, undervalued, and taken for granted boiled to the surface. I felt smaller, shattered. But beneath the cracks, something fierce was awakening, a stubborn refusal to be crushed by betrayal. I replayed every birthday I'd spent watching my achievements ignored, every sacrifice made while Harper basked in favoritism. The silent dinners where my victories were brushed aside for her latest drama, the missing scholarships, the stolen dreams. This wasn't just about a laptop or tuition anymore. This was the final fracture in a family built on lies and injustice. The rain outside pounded harder, matching the thunder in my soul. I wiped my face, the cold air stinging my cheeks, and made a silent vow. I would not be invisible anymore. I would fight back. I would take back my power, and they would learn that betrayal has a price. In that quiet, rain-drenched room, under the flicker of a lone lamp, my journey of revenge and reclaiming justice began. I've never been the type to rely on others or wait for handouts. Since high school, I've been fiercely independent, saving every dollar I earned from part-time jobs for things that truly mattered, and that new laptop was at the top of that list. I worked shifts at a local coffee shop and took weekend cleaning gigs, each grueling task a stepping stone toward a bigger dream. Programming wasn't just a subject or a career path for me, it was my passion. Every line of code, every algorithm I cracked, was a way to connect with my future, to carve out a path away from hardship and into a competitive tech world. That laptop I bought after months of scrimping wasn't just a device. It was my lifeline, the essential tool that fueled my learning and propelled me toward a career I dreamed of. I remember countless long nights at my worn-out desk, bathed in the soft yellow glow of a single lamp, fingers flying over the keyboard as the rain pattered steadily against my window. There were moments when exhaustion almost won, but giving up was never an option. Every completed script felt like a small victory, every high score on a test, a step closer to the future I was building as a software engineer. And now, all those efforts were sold off like worthless junk, and I was ordered to pay tuition for a sister who had never taken responsibility for herself. That injustice didn't just break my heart. It ignited something deep inside me, a fierce resolve to stand up for myself, to demand respect, and to claim the recognition I deserved. My birthday arrived cold and gray, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones. I woke up in that cramped, worn-down family apartment tucked away in a drab Seattle suburb, where the rain seemed endless, a relentless curtain of gray that blurred the world outside and deepened the heavy silence inside. The windows were streaked with raindrops, and the air smelled damp and stale, as if the walls themselves held onto years of disappointment. There was no celebration waiting for me, no warm wishes or gifts, just the familiar quietness of a house that felt more like a cage than a home. The worn-out furniture creaked under the weight of neglect, and faded curtains barely kept out the dreary sky. Outside, puddles formed on cracked sidewalks, reflecting the dull light of a sun that refused to shine. I moved through the motions mechanically, trying to shake the weight pressing on my chest. The constant drizzle outside matched the storm building inside me, a mix of loneliness, frustration, and simmering anger. It was just another day, but for me, it marked the shattering of everything I thought I could rely on. The favoritism in my family was impossible to ignore. Harper, the youngest, was treated like some untouchable star, showered with attention and endless second chances. While I was grinding through double shifts and late-night study sessions, she was out chasing parties, lost in the glow of her phone screen, scrolling through social media feeds that praised her curated, carefree life. School barely mattered to her. She skipped classes without consequence, her grades slipping while mine were the ones that had to hold up the family's reputation. Every time she stumbled or failed, it was dismissed as just a phase, something she'd grow out of, while I was expected to carry the weight of responsibility silently. My achievements were minimized or overshadowed by the loud distractions surrounding her. It wasn't just the unequal treatment, it was the way my parents enabled her. They funded her expensive nights out, bought her the latest gadgets, and never demanded accountability. Meanwhile, I was constantly reminded to tighten my belt, sacrifice for the family, and keep quiet about the growing divide. Their love felt conditional, reserved for the golden child who lived in a fantasy world, leaving me to face reality alone. The weight of injustice pressed heavily on me, more suffocating than the Seattle rain ever could. It wasn't just the unfairness of it all, it was the betrayal, the deep, cutting betrayal that comes from those who are supposed to love you unconditionally. To feel sidelined, disregarded, like I was invisible in my own family, was a loneliness that no one outside could truly understand. I kept asking myself over and over, how did I become the outsider in my own home? How did the people who were meant to protect me turn their backs, choosing a fantasy over the reality I lived every day? It stung worse than any insult or failure because it wasn't strangers who rejected me, it was my own blood. In those quiet moments, I felt so utterly alone. The kind of solitude that gnaws at your soul and makes you question your worth. Yet beneath that loneliness, something fierce and unyielding was growing. A fire fueled by the knowledge that I deserved better, that my worth wasn't defined by their neglect or favoritism. This wasn't just pain. It was the spark that would ignite my fight, to reclaim my dignity, to rewrite the story they tried to erase me from, and to prove that even when family fails you, you can still stand strong on your own. That night, the rain was relentless, pounding on the roof like 1,000 angry fists, blurring the world outside into a dark, wet mess. I remember standing by the front door, suitcase in hand, the cold seeping through my thin jacket and chilling me to the bone. My parents' voices echoed behind me, sharp and unforgiving, telling me it was time to leave. No more support, no more home. Harper, meanwhile, was in her room down the hall, cocooned in warmth and comfort, oblivious to the storm raging outside and the one tearing through my life. She was the golden child, untouchable and protected, while I was cast out like a shadow, unwanted, forgotten, and drenched by the pouring rain. I didn't argue. I didn't cry out for fairness. The betrayal was already carved deep into my heart. I just stepped into the storm, each drop of rain a cold reminder of everything I was losing, and everything I was determined to take back. Standing in the rain, soaked to the skin, I was a whirlwind of raw emotions, pain cutting through me like shards of glass, anger burning fiercely beneath the surface. The hurt wasn't just from being forced out. It was the years of being overlooked, the silent sacrifices, the countless times I was made to feel less than. But beneath the ache and the fury, a steely resolve was hardening inside me. I refused to be anyone's doormat anymore. No more silent suffering. No more letting their neglect define me. The storm around me mirrored the one inside, a chaotic, relentless force ready to break free. I clenched my fists, feeling the cold bite of rain mingle with the fire in my veins. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment I decided to fight back, to reclaim my life on my own terms, and to prove that betrayal would not be my downfall, but my catalyst. Back in the dim light of my temporary refuge, I knew I couldn't let this go. The pain was real, but so was the injustice, and if I wanted to take back control, I had to be smart, methodical. I started digging, sifting through old bills, text messages, bank statements, anything that could prove how deeply my family had exploited me financially. Every receipt told a story, utilities paid in my name, loans taken without consent, money funneled to cover Harper's endless parties and failures. The texts were even worse. Casual dismissals of my struggles, demands disguised as family obligations, and reminders that I was expected to sacrifice. I collected everything carefully, creating a timeline of deceit and betrayal. It wasn't just about the money. It was about exposing a pattern, a betrayal so deep it shook the very foundation of what family was supposed to mean. This evidence was my weapon, my armor against the cold indifference that had pushed me out into the storm. As I gathered the evidence, it hit me, this betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about trust shattered, promises broken, and the family I thought I knew crumbling beneath me. Every dollar taken without my knowledge was a wound, but the deeper cut was the realization that those closest to me had turned their backs when I needed them most. I kept replaying memories, moments I'd confided in my parents, shared my dreams and fears, only to realize how little they truly cared. The financial abuse was just the surface of a much darker truth. A family divided by favoritism, neglect, and a callous disregard for what I deserved. It was painful to accept that love, the one thing I had believed was unconditional, came with strings attached, and those strings were tangled in control and betrayal. But recognizing this was also a turning point. I wasn't just fighting for money or justice. I was reclaiming my dignity and rewriting what family could mean for me. Just when I felt like I was drowning in betrayal and uncertainty, an unexpected lifeline appeared. Elliot, an old friend from high school. We hadn't kept in touch much over the years, but out of the blue, he reached out after hearing bits of my story through mutual acquaintances. Elliot had become a young lawyer specializing in intellectual property and financial law, and his timing couldn't have been better. When we met at a quiet cafe, he listened carefully as I laid out everything, the stolen money, the hidden loans, the emotional wreckage beneath it all. His eyes were sharp but empathetic, and for the first time, I felt like someone truly understood the depth of what I was facing. Elliot didn't just offer sympathy, he offered strategy. He helped me see the path forward, how to document the abuse, what legal avenues were open, and how to protect myself from further exploitation. His support was the anchor I desperately needed, transforming my fear into a plan and my pain into purposeful action. As Elliot and I dug deeper into the financial records, a horrifying secret surfaced. My father hadn't just been dipping into my funds quietly. He had forged my signature to secure bank loans. These loans weren't for bills or emergencies. They were fueling Harper's lavish lifestyle, expensive parties, luxury shopping sprees, and the kind of reckless spending that left our family drowning in debt. The weight of this betrayal hit me like a freight train. To think my own father was willing to drag me into financial ruin just to bankroll a fantasy for my sister was beyond cruel. Every forged document was a slap in the face, a calculated act of deception that shattered any remaining trust I had left. This wasn't just parental neglect anymore. It was outright fraud, a betrayal that could destroy my future if I didn't act fast. The stakes were higher than I ever imagined, and now I had legal grounds not only to fight back, but to expose the full extent of their lies. Once the evidence began to surface, the fragile facade of my family started to crumble. The truth leaked out slowly but relentlessly through investigations and mounting legal pressure. What had been carefully hidden behind closed doors and polite smiles was now exposed in stark, painful detail. Conversations that once avoided uncomfortable topics turned into heated arguments. My parents, who had always projected control and confidence, now stumbled under the weight of scrutiny. Relatives and neighbors whispered about the scandals, and the sense of unity we once pretended to have shattered into fragments. With each new revelation, the forged signatures, the stolen funds, the lies about trust accounts, cracks appeared in their defenses. The family gatherings grew tense and divided, alliances shifting as everyone grappled with the reality they'd been shielded from for so long. I watched all of this unfold with a mix of vindication and sorrow. It was painful to see my family unravel, but it was also a necessary reckoning. Justice wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine, it was about breaking a cycle of deception and abuse that had been quietly destroying us for years. Watching my family's secrets unravel was both a relief and a torment. On one hand, it was vindicating to see the undeniable truth come to light. The lies, the betrayals, the exploitation laid bare for all to see. I felt a hard-earned sense of justice, as those who once dismissed me had no choice but to confront their actions. But on the other hand, it was heartbreaking to witness the fracture of the people I'd once called my closest. Faces I loved twisted in anger, shame, or denial. The family I had longed for all my life was dissolving before me, and I was both the catalyst and the casualty. To make things even harder, outside my family, skepticism lingered. Friends and colleagues struggled to reconcile the person they knew with the painful reality of my story. Some questioned my motives, wondering if I was exaggerating or seeking revenge beyond reason. The social isolation that followed was suffocating, a reminder that truth doesn't always come with easy acceptance. Yet beneath the doubt and loneliness, my resolve only strengthened. I knew that standing up wasn't just about me. It was about breaking the cycle of silence and hurt that had haunted my family for generations. I was determined to reclaim my narrative, even if it meant standing alone against the storm. The evening air outside was crisp with a faint drizzle, typical of Seattle's endless autumns, as I arrived at the Grand Hilton Ballroom nestled in the heart of downtown. The building gleamed under the glow of streetlights, its tall glass doors reflecting the city's restless pulse. Inside, the space was a dazzling contrast, vast and opulent, with towering crystal chandeliers scattering light like stars, polished marble floors stretching endlessly, and walls draped in deep navy velvet that absorbed the murmur of well-dressed guests mingling and clinking glasses. I paused just beyond the entrance, taking a deep breath to steady the storm of emotions inside me. Months ago, this place symbolized everything I had lost: my father's pride, his empire built on deception, and the life I was pushed out of. Tonight, it would witness my return, not as the timid girl overshadowed by family lies, but as a woman claiming her power. Dressed in a sleek crimson gown that hugged my frame with fierce elegance, I felt the weight of every eye shift towards me the moment I stepped onto the gleaming floor. The dress was bold, the color of fire and defiance, a silent scream that said I was no longer invisible. My hair was pulled into a smooth chignon, revealing sharp cheekbones and eyes that burned with quiet intensity. The makeup was subtle but precise, contours that carved out strength, lips painted a muted rose that held back the storm beneath. Each step I took was deliberate, echoing against the marble as a wave of whispers rippled through the crowd. Old acquaintances faltered mid-conversation, their smiles faltering as they caught my gaze. The luxury surrounding me, the polished wood of the grand staircase, the soft glow of candlelit tables, the scent of expensive perfume mixed with fresh flowers, felt both surreal and intoxicating. Inside, my mind raced, memories flashing like lightning, the years of neglect, the stolen money, the quiet betrayals. But tonight, those ghosts were behind me. I wasn't here to plead or explain, I was here to stand tall. I scanned the room, locking eyes with my father across the crowd. His expression shifted from pride to shock, a flicker of uncertainty that I savored like a victory. Despite the elegance and the glamour, my heart thudded with a mix of adrenaline and a faint tremor. This was more than a return. It was a reckoning. Every movement, every smile I gave was armor against the past. I approached the circle of family, friends, and business elites with poise, exchanging curt nods and measured hellos. Their polite smiles barely masked the undercurrent of surprise and unease. Behind my composed exterior, I grappled with a surge of emotions: vindication, sorrow, anger, but above all, a fierce determination. This night wasn't just about showing up. It was about rewriting my story, reclaiming what was stolen, and setting the stage for the justice that was coming. As the orchestra swelled and glasses raised in toasts, I stood as a living testament. I was no longer the girl they could dismiss or betray. I was the storm they never saw coming. Just as the evening was settling into a delicate balance of polite conversations and strategic smiles, the spotlight unexpectedly shifted to Harper, my sister. She arrived late, making a grand entrance like a social media queen stepping onto a stage, every move calculated for maximum attention. Flashy designer dress, perfectly styled hair, and a phone constantly in hand, capturing every moment for her countless followers. At first glance, she seemed untouchable, the golden child thriving under the glow of online fame. But beneath the surface, cracks began to show. Whispers circulated quietly among the guests about how little control Harper actually had over her life. It wasn't her lavish lifestyle or extravagant spending that defined her. It was the fact that she was a puppet, manipulated by my father and a tight-knit circle of wealthy friends who pulled the strings behind the scenes. Her accounts, her purchases, even the carefully curated image she presented were not her own. The reality was stark. Harper had been handed a role to play, her financial decisions made for her, and her voice drowned out by the machinations of those around her. It was a facade, a gilded cage disguised as a glamorous existence. Watching this revelation unfold in real time, I felt a complex mix of emotions: pity for the sister who was trapped in this performance, anger at the forces that controlled her, and a grim satisfaction that the truth was finally coming to light. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about exposing the entire web of deceit that had ensnared my family for years. As murmurs about Harper's facade rippled through the crowd, Elliot stepped forward with a quiet authority that immediately commanded attention. The room gradually hushed as he cleared his throat and pulled out a neatly organized folder filled with documents, evidence that would shake the foundation of my family's carefully constructed lies. With calm precision, Elliot began to outline the legal findings: forged signatures, unauthorized withdrawals, and blatant financial abuses that went far beyond mere family disputes. He spoke of documents proving my father's manipulation of accounts, the falsification of contracts, and even collusion with certain associates to mask these actions. Every word he shared was like a hammer striking a fragile wall, sending shockwaves through the gathered guests. Faces paled, whispers turned to gasps, and my father's confident veneer cracked under the weight of undeniable proof. Then came the announcement that silenced the room completely. Elliot revealed that, with my full support and cooperation, a formal lawsuit had been filed, a comprehensive legal battle aimed at uncovering the truth, holding those responsible accountable, and reclaiming what had been stolen. The gravity of the moment wasn't lost on anyone. This was no longer a private family matter, it was a public reckoning. As Elliot's voice echoed through the hall, I felt a surge of empowerment. The fight I had prepared for in silence was now front and center, backed by law and conviction. The room seemed to hold its breath as my father was suddenly thrust into the harsh spotlight. His usual calm composure faltered, and for the first time, I saw cracks of desperation in his eyes. He launched into frantic denials, stumbling over words as he tried to refute the mounting evidence Elliot had laid bare. His voice, once authoritative and unshakable, now sounded strained and defensive. Around us, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Guests who had once smiled politely now exchanged wary glances, their expressions etched with disbelief and judgment. Whispers grew louder, and the glamour of the evening began to feel like a cruel stage for his unraveling. Meanwhile, Harper's social media feeds exploded with backlash. The golden girl who had once basked in admiration was now drowning in waves of criticism and disappointment. Fans and followers questioned her authenticity, her agency, and the very image she had carefully curated. Sponsors withdrew their support, and once glowing endorsements turned into pointed calls for accountability. Watching her, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and vindication. The sister who had lived so comfortably in the shadows of deceit was now exposed, vulnerable to the very public scrutiny she had once commanded. The house of cards was crumbling, and there was no place left to hide. In that charged moment, I realized this wasn't just about personal justice anymore. It was about truth prevailing, exposing corruption, and reclaiming dignity not only for myself, but for anyone silenced by lies and manipulation. Through the storm of accusations and collapsing facades, I stood with an unshakable calm, a stillness forged from years of pain and betrayal, but tempered by resilience. I felt every eye on me, expecting perhaps a show of anger or desperation, but instead, I offered them something far more powerful: silence and poise. This calm wasn't weakness. It was my declaration that I had survived their deceit, that I was no longer a pawn in their game. Every calculated smile, every measured breath was a quiet indictment of the falsehoods woven through the family and social circles I once trusted. I had witnessed how easily affection and loyalty could be twisted into control and manipulation. In that moment, I saw clearly how many relationships were mere performances, fabricated connections propped up by obligation and appearances, rather than genuine care. The truth of my isolation was stark, but instead of breaking me, it became my armor. I was no longer defined by the wounds they inflicted, but by the strength I had forged in rising above them. Their lies had been exposed, but my integrity remained intact. And in that integrity lay my true power, a power that no amount of betrayal could ever steal. After everything I had endured, one lesson stood out more clearly than any other. Protecting your own rights and well-being isn't selfish, it's essential. I learned that recognizing your own value is the first step toward reclaiming control over your life, especially when those closest to you fail to see it. Setting healthy boundaries became my lifeline. It wasn't just about saying no to being taken advantage of financially, but about defining what kind of respect and treatment I would accept in all my relationships, family included. For years, I had confused sacrifice with love, allowing others to dictate my worth and dictate how much I should give. But real love doesn't demand your erasure. It builds you up without breaking you down. It honors your voice instead of silencing it. By standing firm in what I deserved, I didn't just protect myself, I gave myself permission to heal and grow. I want anyone listening who's feeling lost in toxic family dynamics or unhealthy relationships to know this. Your boundaries are your power. Your self-worth isn't defined by others' acceptance or approval. And sometimes, the hardest love you give yourself is the most necessary of all. I want to be clear about something. Revenge isn't about destruction or bitterness. It's about rebirth and reclaiming your identity on your own terms. True revenge is the quiet strength to rise above betrayal, to transform pain into power, and to show the world that you are more than what was taken from you. It's not about tearing others down. It's about building yourself up, stronger and wiser than before. When you claim your worth and stand firm in your truth, you wield a power that no one can diminish. That's the kind of revenge that changes lives, not just yours, but anyone watching and learning from your journey. In owning my story and refusing to be a victim, I found my freedom. I found my voice. And in doing so, I hope to inspire others to see that sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply becoming the best, most authentic version of yourself. To everyone listening, I want to say this. Never accept being silenced, diminished, or hurt by those who should protect and support you. Stand up for yourself, set your boundaries, and demand the respect you deserve. Your voice matters, and your well-being is non-negotiable. But you don't have to face these battles alone. We need to build a community where people who have experienced betrayal and injustice, especially within families, can find strength, understanding, and solidarity. Together, we can break the cycle of pain and support each other in reclaiming our lives. If you've been through something similar, share your story, reach out, and know that there is power in unity. Let's rise together, heal together, and create a world where no one feels trapped by their past or defined by others' betrayals.